reacting, which means you agree, or no action, which means you disagree. We begin in the National Football League. Reaction or no action, Aaron? The Indianapolis Colts made a savvy move on Monday after they sent a third-round pick to the Atlanta Falcons for 14-year veteran quarterback Matt Ryan.
No action here for me. Now, I was very surprised when I got this notification. I was like, what's going on here? Why are they trading for Matt Ryan of all people? Now, when you look at his total QBR last season, it was the worst of his career. Now, we know he won NFL MVP back in 2017. He's had the most passing yards in each season since then, so that's great. But at the same time, yes, he has the experience as a veteran. I'm just not sure how he's going to fit into the Colts offense. When you compare him and Wentz, right now they have identical 6.13 yards per drop back last season, but Wentz had the edge in total QBR, touchdowns, interceptions, while Ryan completed a higher percentage of his passes. This all coming from ESPN stats and info. Just for me, no action on this one. I was a little confused by it. Obviously, I think he'll help more than Carson Wentz did, but again, no action for me.
I'm going to go reaction on this one. I don't know what else the Colts were going to do. They needed a quarterback. They wanted to get involved in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes, but Houston wasn't going to agree to that. The bottom line here is that this team is ready to win now. If they were Jacksonville, if they were some other fledgling franchise that has a few years to figure it out, fine, you don't need to make the move. But they've got one of the best offensive lines in football. They've got the NFL's leading rusher in Jonathan Taylor. They got weapons at wide receiver, and they have a top-flight defense. They have everything you need, including a soft division, to get to the playoffs and make some noise, except quarterback.
Wait, Weimer,
they took a shot on Wentz. It didn't work. They took a shot now on Matt Ryan. They had to do something. I think, if anything, though, one thing it says is what the league thinks about Jimmy Garoppolo. Because as all these quarterbacks and all these teams have made their decisions, Garoppolo is still in San Francisco with apparently no buzz whatsoever. So for me, I like the Colts. They had to figure something out. Ryan at least gives them some stability and some playoff experience. I'm going with reaction. Number 2, we go to college basketball. 8 seed North Carolina knocked off top-seeded Baylor over the weekend in a wild game that saw the Tar Heels blow a 25-point lead but come back to win it in overtime. UNC now plus 380 to win the East region behind both Purdue and UCLA. So, reaction or no action? North Carolina will win the East region.
Surprisingly, I'm going to go action here. And the reason being is, one, Doug Kazarian called this before. He actually talked about this on Daily Wager, that this was a long shot and the East is completely wide open. But I like what I'm seeing from UNC. Yes, they lost that lead to Baylor, but at the same time, they beat one of the best teams in the nation. Baylor was the #1 seed. Yes, they didn't have their leading scorer, LJ Cryer, but at the same time, they're showing waves of when they're really playing well and how they can play against good competition. They're getting hot at the right time. Now, I know they're going to face UCLA. They're a short dog right now, plus 2.5. There's the potential that they could potentially beat UCLA and then have to go on and face a Purdue squad, again, all hypothetically. But I do think that they could potentially come out of the East. Everything's clicking for them right now, so I do like action on this one.
The fact that they didn't fold after blowing that 25-point lead says a lot. They're going to be resilient moving forward, but I am going to go no action on this one. And it really comes down to a one-game pick against UCLA, because if UNC wins that game, I see them beating St. Peter's or Purdue. Purdue, by the way, should not be here. The free throw discrepancy in that Texas game yesterday, where I lost a lot of money, 46-12. Are we not opening an investigation into 46 free throws versus 12? I'm going to hammer on that until something happens or until I run out of gas. Most likely the latter rather than the former, but I digress. The situation here is that I think UCLA is going to beat UNC, and that's why I'm not going to bet them to win the region. UNC's been good, but they struggle mightily with three-point defense. And when you struggle with three-point defense, you don't want to run into a team like UCLA, who's very balanced on both ends of the court. One of the only teams in the country that's top 13 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. I wasn't high on UCLA coming into the tournament, but after they absolutely smashed St. Mary's over the weekend, I'm back on the train with them. That was a huge win. I think they take care of UNC, so I'm not going to make a futures bet on the Tar Heels. We keep it moving. Speaking of the East region, the darling of this year's tournament is St. Peter's, who is currently a 12.5-point favorite, underdog for their Sweet 16 battle against the Boilermakers. Reaction or no action, St. Peter's will cover the 12.5 points.
reaction here, but I do want to mention that I'm probably not looking to bet into this game. This is a large line right now, and it is Monday. We have until Thursday to be betting on these games, and the line is already moving out, and you're going to be able to probably get value on the St. Peter's team. And yes, it's the St. Peter's Peacocks. I know we're probably all saying, where is this team? I told Joe this morning on the podcast that I was Googling, where even is St. Peter's? But nonetheless, they've been obviously playing great. They were able to take down a squad like Kentucky and then Murray State. But when they do face a Purdue squad, I do want to mention that Purdue's second in adjusted offensive efficiency on KenPom right now. While St. Peter's does have a better defense, we're kind of a little mismatched there in terms of that. But remember, Purdue's supposed to be in the spot. They are a number 3 seed, and St. Peter's was able to kind of make it to the Sweet 16 by, I don't even know how, but they have been able to do this. So for me, I would say maybe back them, but at the same time, I would be very cautious and see if you can get better value over the next couple of days.
You looked them up. Where are they located? Isn't it Jersey?
It's kind of embarrassing that I looked it up and I don't even remember at this point. I'm almost it might be Jersey.
I believe it's Jersey City, which now that we've referenced Jersey City and Jersey Shore, big New Jersey episode here. We should see if Diana Rossini wants to come on and talk about the great Garden State. I am going to react to this. I'm going to go ahead and play St. Peter's plus the 12.5 points. I've been fading Purdue the whole way through the tournament. It has not been working well for me, but I'm not going to stop now. St. Peter's brings a pretty good defense to the table, but they do guard the three-point line quite well. And if you're going to go against a team like Purdue, you got to be able to defend the three-pointer because they live and die with that shot throughout the course of the season. They are a big three-point shooting team. Again, Purdue overvalued in my opinion. 46 free throws against Texas. 46 in a 40-minute game. That is absolutely absurd when Texas only had 12 free throws. I think we're putting too much weight on them. They should be the favorite. They should be favored big, but not by this much. St. Peter's plus 12.5 for me. Now, that takes care of some of Friday's action. Let's take a look at Thursday's action. NCAA Tournament March Madness Thursday edition. We are going to begin with number 1 seeded Gonzaga. They're laying 8.5. The total is 154.5. They're taking on 4 seed Arkansas. How would you play this one?
So I think when I'm looking at these lines, I want to stay away from this game. I feel like 8.5 is a really strange number for me to be betting, and neither of these teams have covered so far in the tournament. In fact, Arkansas hasn't covered in their last 3 games, and we saw last game for Gonzaga against Memphis. They ended up going down by 10 points. They were able to claw back, but they didn't cover the 9.5 points. Now, both these teams, obviously great teams, and it's going to be really hard for Arkansas to be able to stop a team like Gonzaga, but they can keep up with them in terms of tempo. The one thing I would say, though, about Arkansas is they rank outside the top 300 in terms of three-point shooting. So they can't go shot for shot, so they might, again, keep up with that tempo. But for me, I'm staying away from this game out of all the games that are going on this Thursday.
I will happily get involved like I have been in every single game that's played. Don't ask me how my pocketbooks look today. I just like the action. I'm going to play Arkansas plus the 8.5. I don't necessarily trust Gonzaga. That's what this comes down to. Game 1 against Georgia State, you come out, you lead by 2 at the half. Should have blown the doors off that team. You were a 20-plus point favorite, and you didn't cover. That's fine, but you shouldn't have struggled. And that should have only been a one-game thing. If you're the number 1 overall seed, you should shake that rust off and then play big the next night out. Well, when they played Memphis, Memphis gave them all they could handle, covered the spread, only lost that game by 4. Gonzaga very well could have lost that game. So now they're laying 8.5 against a battle-tested SEC team that brings a very good defense to the table, that can knock down their free throws, and is coached by Eric Musselman, who year in and year out shows us he knows how to get it done in the month of March. I think it's too many points. Gonzaga probably wins, but I'll take the Razorbacks plus the 8.5. Let's keep it moving. 2 seed Villanova, laying 5. Total of 135 against Michigan. Are you on the Wolverines train here?
I'm going to lay the points here with Villanova. And I know I'm not biased. I know I'm from Philly and whatnot, but I do think that this line has moved out slightly in favor of Villanova once again. But I do think that you should still lay the 5 here. Now, for Michigan, they were alternating wins coming into the tournament. On top of that, there was a lot of drama going on, but they've been playing great. The fact that they took down Tennessee, who I had to win the entire thing, was absolutely insane. Hunter Dickinson was great in that game. He had 27 points. He's averaging 24 points so far in the tournament. But I do think Villanova is just so experienced with some of these veterans. They've been on this stage before. They're not rattled. They do play at a slower pace, and I do think that they'll be able to kind of pull out towards the end of the game. They're one of the best free throw shooting teams. So if it does come down to the final, let's say 2 minutes, and we start getting into the back and forth fouling and whatnot, I do think that they will be able to cover that 5. I just trust Colin Gillespie, Jermaine Samuels, as well as Justin Moore a lot more than I trust this Michigan squad.
I would like to make it clear to the billions of people watching this right now that Erin and I actually like each other. I'm not trying to go the other way on literally everything she's saying. It's just how this is working out. I'm going to take Michigan plus the 5 here. If you look at the style for these two teams, very slow, very defensive. Villanova ranks 345th in tempo. There's only 358 teams. Michigan similar, 202nd in tempo. Methodical teams that like to bring the ball up the court, take their time, get into their sets, try to knock down some shots. They both play good defense as well. Michigan seems to have figured it out. They fizzled at the end of the season. They completely bombed out of the Big Ten tournament, and now they've come in and not only taken out their opening round opponent, who a lot of people thought was going to upset them, but they took down Tennessee, a darling in the eyes of many. I played them 60-1, and I didn't even bother hedging because I just assumed they would get through the opening weekend. Teams playing good basketball right now. Ultimately, I think this comes down to the point that I'm going to have 5 in my pocket, and that's what I'm going to want because I think it's going to be a very tightly contested matchup. I will take Michigan. We keep it moving here. Number 3 seed, Texas Tech, laying 1. Total of 136.5 against 2-seeded Duke. Coach K survives the opening weekend. How are you going to play this one, Edie?
So I'm looking to play the under here, and it's come down from 137 already down to 136 like you had just mentioned. But the reason I like this under is because Texas Tech, when you go back and look at what the totals are posted for some of the previous games, the last time you saw a total posted higher than 136.5 was back on January 24th. That was against Kentucky, and that line closed 139.5, and it went over only because there was an overtime. We know in this spot Duke can score. They're ranked 3rd in adjusted offensive efficiency on Ken Pom, but at the same time, Texas Tech, their defense is no joke. They're ranked 1st in adjusted defensive efficiency, and we saw what happened with Notre Dame last game. They were able to hold them below their team total, which would drop to 61.5. They only put up 54 points when on average they were scoring 75 points. So the Texas Tech Red Raiders can really slow a team down. And obviously Duke is a better scoring team than Notre Dame, but at the same time, Notre Dame wasn't shabby. So I do think that this could be a potential under game, and the Texas Tech Red Raiders will be able to limit this Duke squad just slightly.
Oh, I absolutely love the over here. Just kidding. I'm just screwing around because we have been on the opposite side to everything.
I was gonna say, Joe.
Not playing the over in this game. Just joking. I'm going to lay the one with Texas Tech. So we're not going head-to-head on this one at all. I'm going to go with Texas Tech. I'm not a believer in Duke. I'm really not. That win yesterday over Michigan State, it's a good win, don't get me wrong, but when you just look at the final score and you think, oh, they handled them, they didn't. They were losing that game late. Michigan State kept calling timeout so that they could find new and innovative ways to turn the ball over off the timeout. That's all Izzo was doing in that game. Horribly coached down the stretch. Another bet that I ended up losing, as you can tell by my current rant. Duke's defense has gone MIA late in the season. They're giving up 78 points per game over their last 6. Texas Tech is going to be able to limit what they want to do. Slow tempo, elite defense, a team that can knock down their free throws. If you watch the end of that game yesterday against Notre Dame, magnificent the way they played. They hit every single free throw. They played fantastic defense. They forced turnovers. They got blocks. They look great. I'm going to take Texas Tech minus the 1. Final pick before we transition to the National Basketball Association. 1 seed Arizona, laying 2, total of 145 against Houston. How do you see it?
Houston money line for this one. I think this will be the upset of Thursday. And it's a slight upset. It's nothing crazy here. But Houston has everything going for them right now. They're great on offense and they're great on defense. And right now, Arizona has an absolute problem, and that is in turnovers. They had 16 against TCU, 19 against Wright State, and 64 total turnovers in the last 4 games. And unfortunately for them, Houston defense will attack like crazy. They're 3rd in the nation in steals. Both these teams are hot right now. I just think Houston has what it takes on offense and defense to upset a team like Arizona that hasn't been the best against great competition. I mean, I know they've been, winning nonstop. They won 9 straight, but at the same time, when they faced a team like Tennessee that kind of pressed them in terms of defense, they weren't able to win that game. So I like Houston as an upset on the money line.
All right, we're in somewhat of an agreement here because if Houston ends up springing the upset, it's probably because they're going to play elite defense, and that's what I'm betting. Under 145 in this matchup. I think this number is way too high. I can see why it's there because Arizona is a high-flying unit, but they are also top 20 in defensive efficiency. Keep that in mind. They can get some stops. Look at how Houston plays basketball. Fantastic defense, top 10 in the country, but they also play at one of the slowest tempos at 333rd out of 358 teams, all right? It's as slow as it gets. It's as methodical as it gets. If you bet an under in a Houston game, it is excruciating. They played Illinois yesterday. They held them to 53 points. They played Memphis in their conference final final of the conference tournament, they held them to 53 points. And that's a high-flying unit. Essentially what I'm saying here is I think they're going to frustrate Arizona, and I think Arizona is going to be able to get their stops as well. So I'm going to go under 145 points, although it wouldn't surprise me if this got steamed up a little bit by the public by the time we get to tip-off. Let's kick it up a notch as we go from the collegiate ranks to the professional ranks, where the reeling Philadelphia 76ers stop traffic, get set to host the Miami Heat tonight. We're going to get to that game in just a moment, but we're going to start with a little Thursday night pick'em. First game out, Cleveland laying 5, total of 227 against the Lakers as LeBron James is back in town. How would you attack this one, Erin?
So with LeBron James back in town, I'm trying not to be basic, but here I am being basic. We are looking at LeBron points prop. It is at 30.5 for this game. I'm going to say take the over on this one. He's really been cashing the over tickets lately. He's averaging 34.7 points against Cleveland in the 3 times that he's met his former team, obviously since he left back in 2017. But in that game, the most recent game that he's ended up playing against Cleveland, he only had 26 points, but he went 1 for 10 from 3. And I think in this game, you might see him be able to put up a ton of more threes only because his points prop for threes made is 2.5 right now. And that's really, really juiced. So I do think he'll be able to put up some points in this spot. He's also hit over this number in 4 of the last 6 games, averaging 33.5 points in the last 10 games. So really heating up LeBron James. So I think he'll hit over his points prop of 30.5.
All right, I'm going to go player prop as well. Cleveland Cavaliers, Evan Mobley under 10.5 rebounds. This is a big number. And I think it's overinflated because of the fact that Mobley's hit this mark in 5 of his last 8 games. But that's a really small sample. Expand the sample, and you'll notice he hasn't hit this mark in 29 of his last 39 games. Now, this is going to be a bit of a sweat because the Lakers aren't a very good rebounding team. But remember, Mobley is averaging just 8.3 rebounds per game this season. So we're asking him to not only soar above his average, but we're asking him to buck the trend of the last 39 games, which is 29 times he didn't go over. Again, brace yourselves because the Lakers stink at rebounding, but I think the number's too high based on what we've seen as of late. Mobley under 10.5 rebounds. Let's keep it cooking. The Utah Jazz, they took care of the Knicks last night. They are still in New York. They're going to Brooklyn to take on the Nets. Utah laying 1.5, total of 229.5. What's the play here?
So I like Jazz money line in this one. It's only minus 125, so it's not too much juice at this point. And they actually opened as dogs in this matchup. But the Jazz, I mean, they're ranked first in offensive rating for the season, averaging 116 points per game. Yes, they're on the back-to-back, but there's very limited travel considering they're going from Madison Square Garden over to the Brooklyn Nets side of town. But I do think that Brooklyn, again, I mean, I don't know how many times we're going to talk about it, but Kyrie Irving's not going to be able to play in this game because of the vaccine mandate, and that always makes me nervous. Yes, Kevin Durant is able to, put down crazy amount of shots, but at the same time, if they start being able to limit him and double teaming him, I think that could be a problem. The Jazz is also a very good defensive team. They've held their last 2 opponents, the Clippers and the New York Knicks, to under 100 points. Yes, I know the Brooklyn Nets can score better than the Clippers and the Knicks, but at the same time, I could see this being a shootout, and I think the Jazz will win it.
I hope it's not a shootout for my sake because I am going to play the under here, but I'm going against the move. It's been going up. It's at 229.5. Essentially, the rationale is this. There's no Kyrie Irving, which is very obvious to say, but when Kyrie plays this season, when he's on the floor, the Nets produce an offensive rating that would rank number 1 in the NBA. He's that important to what they do. When he's off the floor, that offensive rating plummets to a number that would rank 18th in the NBA. You see what I mean? The pace slows down a little bit as well without Irving. The defensive rating picks up just a little bit. So keep that in mind going into this game. Utah this season, 9th in defensive rating, 22nd in pace. They get a lot of stops, and they're coming around at the right time. Keep in mind, the Jazz on the road have cashed a lot of unders tickets, including 5 straight. So I'm going to play under 229.5, Jazz and the Nets. We keep it moving. The Chicago Bulls are at home. They're laying 4, total of 220.5. They're taking on the Toronto Raptors, who took out the Philadelphia 76ers yesterday. How do you see it here?
This was one of my favorite plays this morning when the line opened at plus 4.5. I'm going to take the points with the Raptors. I still like it at plus 4. You have a Bulls team that's just been struggling. They've lost 3 straight. That was on a West Coast swing. On top of that, they've lost 8 of the past 10 games. I feel like this is a totally different Bulls team than we are speaking about right now than what we were talking about a few months ago. But they've really, really been struggling. Meanwhile, the Raptors have been picking things up. They're 7-3 against the spread in their last 10 games away from home. They've also won 6 straight on the road. That win against Philadelphia was super super, super impressive. They also didn't have Fred VanVleet in that game. He's going to be playing in this game, I assume, just given that his points prop and everything are currently posted. But I just think they've been clicking. They've been great on the road, like I had mentioned, and the Bulls have really been struggling. The Bulls need the win more. I'm not saying the Raptors will definitely beat the Bulls, but I think they will cover this number for sure.
I'm going to play the under here at 220.5, but I'm going to exercise some caution. It's going to be a smaller wager because at this morning when we were talking about this, it was 223.5, and it's been dropping. So the price isn't nearly as good. Now, I think the price was inflated because of what we've seen from Chicago's defense over its last 3 games. But you got to look at who they've played. Those last 3 games I just talked about, they're giving up 122 points per game. So the thought process here is that the defense stinks right now. But they played Phoenix, they played Utah, and they played Sacramento. Phoenix and Utah are number 1 and 2 in the NBA in offensive efficiency. Of course, you're going to give up a lot of points in those matchups. Sacramento plays at a fast pace, so they're going to score a lot as well. Toronto is not like those teams. They're 15th in offensive rating. They move a little bit slower from a tempo standpoint. They play good defense. So I think this number was originally inflated, now not as much. Chicago's been an under team as of late, 6-1 to the under over their last 7 outings. Again, keep in mind, when Chicago got blitzed lately, all 3 of those games I talked about were on the road. They're home tonight. They give up fewer points at home. They win more games at home. They play better at home. 220.5, we are going to go under Chicago and Toronto. Let's keep it moving. One of the marquee games on tonight's card, the Miami Heat are in Philadelphia to take on the Sixers. This line has gone wild. This morning, Miami was laying 1.5 on the road. Then the news came down that Jimmy Butler was going to play and moved it up to 2.5. And then the news came down out of nowhere that Joel Embiid was not going to play, and it shot up to 4.5. So Miami's laying 4.5. The total's 215. How do you see it for our Sixers tonight?
Yeah, I'm really surprised that Embiid is not playing in this game, and I'm also not surprised that Jimmy Butler actually is playing in this game. But what I was looking to do in this situation was look at the Sixers team total and play the under. I liked it at under 106.5 this morning. I tweeted that out, and it's moved down to 105.5. Slightly because, of course, Joel Embiid is not going to be in this game. In the 3 previous matchups, 2 of those had hit under the total of 106.5. And when they play against a team like Miami, they're very limited. They're only averaging 95 points when playing against the Miami Heat in those 3 games. So I did kind of want to look at that because we know the Miami Heat defense is absolutely elite. Right now, they are ranked 1st in opponent 3-point percentage, 5th in opponent 3-point percentage on the season. They're also 5th in defensive rating on the season, 2nd in defensive rating in the last 15 games, meaning their defense continues to get better and better. I really thought with Joel Embiid, assuming this morning that he was playing, they would have really clamped down on all of these players. They would have been tired on a back-to-back. Philly just, for some reason, never plays well at home anymore. I feel like it's a bad omen when they're playing at Wells Fargo Center. But just in general, I don't think they're going to hit over their team total of 106.5, especially with Embiid not playing. I know people are thinking that James Harden is going to be able to pick things up. His points prop right now, 26.5. I don't see that happening on a back-to-back, especially after losing to the Raptors. They only put up 88 points to the Toronto Raptors, and they didn't have Fred VanVleet. It's very embarrassing for the Philadelphia 76ers, so going under for their team total.
Yes, you're finally starting to sour like the rest of us Sixers fans. That's how it's meant to be. No optimism ever for the Sixers, the Flyers, the Eagles, or the Phillies. Never. I'm going to get to my pick in just a moment, but I want to ask you a follow-up. You said you'd go under Harden's points prop at 26.5. For him to record a triple-double tonight, it's plus 375. So maybe he doesn't get the 26 points, but he doesn't need to for a triple-double. Would you have any interest whatsoever in playing the Harden triple-double prop?
You know, that's not actually a terrible question because he actually might be able to have a triple-double. He should want to go off in front of Philly and show how great of a player he is and that he can do this without Joel Embiid. I know we had kind of talked about a few times Tyrese Maxey as well being like a big 3, quote-unquote, people were calling them. Joe and I are Sixers fans, so we knew that wasn't really the case. But he can help, obviously, get things going as well, and Harden could be dishing the ball out to him, and he has other players to facilitate some plays. So, yes, an assist in terms of rebounds and whatnot, crashing the boards. But just remember, they're just so good defensively that would be the one category that rebounds that I'd be a little bit worried about. Wouldn't be worried about the assists, wouldn't be worried about the points. It's just those rebounds that I'd be a little concerned about, but not terrible value at plus 375.
Absolutely. One thing that scares me from a Miami perspective tonight is that when you hear the star player from the other team is out, sometimes teams show up and don't bring their A game. And that's what worries me a little bit about Miami. I am going to go ahead and play the under here, 215.5. This morning on the podcast when we were talking, I was playing Philadelphia. That's because I thought Embiid was going to play and we had value in the fact that they had struggled as of late. They're a team that's been very resilient off losses as of late. Last 12 losses, they've come back the next game, 11-1 straight up, 8-3-1 against the spread. They've been fantastic, but with no Embiid, I can't pick the side. So give me the under at 215.5. You take Embiid off the court, the offensive rating drops from 114 to 106. That is a precipitous fall. Translation, the offense really struggles. In addition, the pace drops as well when Embiid leaves the court, so that leads to fewer possessions. Miami, as you alluded to, top 5 in defensive rating, 27th in pace. They are the type of team that really grinds you down when they show up with their A game. And with Butler playing tonight, you figure this is a chance to further cement themselves as the number 1 seed. He goes out there, the Heat go out there, they want to handle their business. Keep in mind, the last 4 meetings between these two teams, the Miami Heat and the Sixers have gone under each of those 4 games. So they tend to play a little tighter matchup than maybe some expect. I'll play the under here, but it's not my favorite play on the board. A bonus play, I do like LaMelo Ball over 5.5 rebounds tonight. I think the situation's nice with a low price against New Orleans, but that's a story for another day. Her name is Erin Dolan. She's fantastic. My name is Joe Fortenbaugh because Tyler Fulgham's on vacation again, and that's why I'm here. The guy lives the dream. We'll see you next time.